You're listening to Season 1 of Ding Dong Darkness Time. If this is your first time joining us, we hope you'll check out all the other episodes of this season, each one delving into the dark side of the arts. If you love it, tell the world. In the meantime, let's take a little trip, shall we?
Wait, is this going to make it in there? I thought that was the preamble to the show.
No, you're.
Oh, okay.
No, it's
all
not.
Right.
It's
all
not.
Right.
No, I won't put it in there. Okay, all right.
No, it's too fitting for this episode. You decide. You decide.
You're absolutely right, Chris. It's like you knew we were going to be talking about a horse.
Oh, yes. A blue horse. The Mustang.
If you were listening on our previous episode, then you would know that we had a blue anatomically correct creature on the docket, as it were, and that yes, it is a horse. It is a rearing Mustang, reaching into the sky to welcome travelers to the American West. And if you are somebody who lives in the Denver, Colorado region, or if you have ever flown into Denver, or if you just happen to know because you're a well-traveled person, you might already know what we're talking about. A horse named Blucifer. Blucifer, ladies and gentlemen, or the proper name as the artist intended, Mustang. Why are we talking about this? Well, Chris might wonder, because this was kind of my thing. I got Devil's Interval, our last episode, from Chris's own dive into research on a show for his podcast, 80s High. But this one, I've been wanting to talk about, I think in some way or another, for the last decade or so. And it's mostly because when I visited Denver, Colorado, I visited my dear friend Ian Healy, who is an author, by the way. Great superhero books you should check out. Ian came and picked me up from the airport. And my first encounter with Blucifer was thus. I saw this giant blue, bright blue.
Yes, like a cobalt blue, right? Like
right.
Yeah.
He looks like it's like that hellish pastel blue. Yeah, that cobalt blue. Like not even quite pastel. It's just vivid, right? It's just nobody would ever call this a lame navy blue.
Yeah.
So on its hind legs with its forelegs just reaching into the sky, and its mane is like pointy, and then chief among all of that are these glowing red eyes.
Yes.
Demonic looking red eyes that I only recently learned were actually lit by LEDs.
Yeah. He's an energy-saving horse. He's demonic, but he cares about the environment. He wants to save energy. He's a conservationist.
It looks, though, like the way that they're lit from within, they look like they're burning. It stuck with me. And my friend Ian, when I asked him about this thing, he kind of gave me a rundown. They call it Blucifer because it just looks like this kind of evil blue horse with red eyes. In this position of, like, if you saw a horse of this size rearing over you, you would be saying your final goodbyes to your mortal existence, right? Also, the statue killed its artist. And, and that's when my ears really perked up.
Yeah, I mean, it does have that devilish look. You can't deny it with these glowing red eyes. And it's not just like a faint red. It is, like you said, a piercing red. We all know LED is a pretty harsh light. It is a bold light. It is not subtle. And just the tones, like I said, it's like a cobalt blue to me, like that earthy cobalt. But it obviously has like a, I don't know what the right word is, like a patina. It's like a gradation. There's levels of the blue. So it gives it depth and texture, but it goes into these like darker black colors. So you can't not look at it and have this feeling of darkness, of a sinisterness to it, right? You don't see it and it's like jovial, fun, lively. It definitely leaves an imprint on your mind. And it's funny, I've been to the Denver International Airport. Driving into and out of it, I honestly do not remember seeing this statue. How on earth did I miss it?
I know. I think it is one of those things that if you're not coming in and out of the right place, or maybe you're just not looking in the right direction, and they have it kind of set off a little bit, so nobody can really get to it very easily if they try to like walk up to it. Actually, it's kind of blocked off. And they did that mostly due to like anti-terrorism protocols and things like that.
I was going to say the original intent was to have a little pull-off where you could go closer to it, but I think 9/11 and like you said, the protocols that came out of that basically nixed that idea. Which
in some ways is good and in some ways unfortunate, because I would love to get a picture with Blucifer. Love to selfie it up with that big blue stallion daddy.
That beast.
But that beast with a very anatomically correct package, which is, again, that's part of the controversy as well. But I would definitely say that even if it looked like a regular brown horse, that didn't have the red eyes, I think if you just kept the dick on it, it would probably still be about as controversial.
That's fair. That's
controversial. Fair. Yeah. So let's dive into, apart from this demonic horse, it has a reputation all its own. It was also rife with controversy really from the get-go, from its commissioning on to when it was installed. And I already mentioned, of course, that, the folklore that the horse killed its creator. And that is technically true. But I want to back up and kind of talk about this artist. He's a really interesting guy. And unfortunately, I do feel like his accomplishments and his talents kind of get lost in the wash of how he died, unfortunately. But his name is Luis Jimenez, was born in El Paso in 1940. And his dad owned an electrical shop, and he worked primarily with neon lights. And that's where he learned, Luis learned how to make his art, essentially, that required a lot of like welding and painting and some of these more industrial processes. It's been said that the LED lights in Mustang's eyes are a tribute to his father, who did a lot of big neon signs for like major hotels and things like that. So Luis went on to study architecture and fine art at the University of Texas. He was really influenced by the Mexican-American working class and people who crossed the Rio Grande / Rio Bravo to come over here, especially in the American West, because out there you deal with like illegal immigration and, a lot of more assimilation and really this intersection of culture, right, between immigration from Mexico and the exploration of the American West really intersects in Denver. So there's so much of that there. Jimenez was ultimately commissioned by the organization that built the airport because many of his statues exist at the Smithsonian. And he's also done blue horses with red eyes before in some of his other sculptures. So this is like a theme for him. And one of the more fascinating aspects of Jimenez's life is he encountered a dying coyote on the side of the road once. I think he saw it lying on the side of the road and he pulled over and realized that the coyote was beyond saving. And so he ended up suffering. And then he eventually became convinced that the coyote entered his consciousness. And as Jimenez aged and he became partially blind, he started like making all these different self-portraits and stuff of himself that was like superimposed with this coyote over his face. And he also made this sculpture called Howl. That's one of his more well-known works of art that also shows like this coyote that's like representative of his spirit. And so he was just a very imaginative, eccentric, interesting man. And he was also very much a perfectionist. So when the statue was commissioned in 1993, he was given $650,000. And this was 2 years before the airport opened. It opened in 95, officially. But the statue itself was not installed at the airport until 2008. And during that time, Jimenez was sued and just given all kinds of grief because he hadn't produced the statue. Well, his molds that he used to create many of his sculptures took years to make. They were massive, right? And super detailed and it was a construction work of itself. And Mustang is 32 foot high as it rears from its back legs, and it weighs a couple tons. It's a massive art installation.
Made of fiberglass, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. And it had like these really like welded armatures and, of course, all the painting and the plastering and all that. So he was going to go over time and over budget regardless, right? And he always said too that he was never able to work quickly. That's why a lot of his when you're being commissioned by this big authoritative body that's just paying you money and sees you as a commodity, it can be very hard to produce under that kind of pressure. Just speaking as being an artist and knowing artists, and some people flourish under that, but many do not.
Right.
But at age 65, so 2006, he died when he had the head of the sculpture completed. And I think the body was most of the way there, but he was painting it at the time. Like it had needed another coat of blue paint, the demonic blue paint. And as the body painting was going on, a piece of the sculpture fell off and pinned his leg and severed his femoral artery. Basically, he knew that he was going to die from this. Like it was kind of sad actually reading about his death, because it sort of seemed to be like a culmination of a lot of bad events, unfortunately. But his sons followed in their father's footsteps. They ended up finishing the sculpture, completing it, and then it was installed in 2008, 15 years after it was commissioned. So a little bit after the deadline, as sometimes happens, but that story really stuck. And so when you look at the horse and what it evokes, and what happened to the artist after essentially a very cursed commissioning, it feels like it's a fitting part of the dark arts, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Also, interestingly, a lot of people believe that the horse represents the fourth horse of the apocalypse, death, which is interesting. But again, there's a lot of hype around the horse. But what can we say, Chris? Like, what we already know is pretty fascinating, right? I mean, we're talking about a really interesting artist who makes this evocative kind of artwork. And then, he has his own kind of spiritual and maybe possibly psychological stuff happen. And then, he gets this big commission, and then he struggles to get it done. And then a piece of it falls on him and it kills him. I mean, what we know
right
is a pretty fascinating story. But then people got to try to sexy it up even more. And so that about the horse of the apocalypse, if that were all, that would be one thing. But this is at the Denver International Airport. And if you are possibly attuned to any of this kind of stuff people talk about on the internet, I was aware of it actually the same year that I went out to Denver, because my friend told me, oh yeah, make sure when you're in there, you look at the Illuminati murals. Yeah. So the Denver International Airport is sort of a hub for this. And it's like Mustang serves as the gateway, right? It's the first thing you see, really, unless you're Chris, whenever you get there.
You know what I was thinking? I may have actually gone there before it was installed. I missed the 2008 installation deadline. I think I actually was there prior to that. So maybe that's why I missed it.
Okay. All right. That makes a lot of sense. But yeah, the airport itself, right? So it is, even the construction of it comes with a bit of controversy. So it opened in 1995, and the project was finished late, 16 months behind schedule. It also came in $2 billion over budget. So it cost a total of $4.8 billion to make this airport. And I guess at the time, there was a lot of question as to whether the city even needed this airport, right? They already had an airport. It was closer to the city. We didn't need this big fancy airport. then I guess like some construction workers who worked on the project came forward and were like, this place is like full of tunnels, that this vast tunnel system that runs underground, and we had to hook up all these fancy electrical systems. And
was there something about they had to sign like non-disclosure agreements or something to not like say what was going on or give away details?
Exactly. And, a lot of people then came to theorize that they were building bunkers down there, like that there was going to be the headquarters for the New World Order. So like when Doomsday finally came, they could go, like the world's elite could go underground and be safe. And then it became like a thing where, it's a FEMA concentration camp. And, we're going to herd all these people underground. And we get to the dedication stone. This always gets me, Chris. Oh my God. I could rant about this stuff for days, but this one really pisses me off. Okay. So the dedication stone has a Freemason logo, and, which the Freemasons are the largest secret society in the world. I mean, I think if you've heard of any of them, you've heard of this one, right? We have a Masonic temple here in, lovely Dayton, Ohio. Mm-hmm. And there's a huge Masonic influence out here. Maybe I'll cover that later. Anyway, they dedicate the dedication stone, the cornerstone that was laid for the dedication of the building was March 19th, 1994. Well, if you add up the digits in 19 and 1994, it equals 33.
Numerology.
The highest level one can reach in Freemasonry. Oh. It is considered the perfect number. But of course, what they never mention, because that would be so inconvenient, is the month. Did we suddenly just throw out the numerical representation of the month because it doesn't fit our neat little story that we're actually talking about 36 and not 33? So these things that like overanalyze dates, I just find hilarious because it's always about the Gregorian calendar. Yeah. And only a portion of it, whatever supports the thing. It's really fun too. It's almost like the stone. Like when you look at the dedication, it spells out March and the rest of its numbers, almost like it wants you to do that. I don't know. It's silly. But I'll circle back to this later. Okay, so, and the plaque also mentions that this was funded by the New World Commission, which is believed to be referring to the New World Order.
Of course.
Who is this shady organization? Like, if you dig into the New World Commission, there's really nothing there other than referring back to the airport. So it seems a little weird. But again, we can come back to that. Like, the Freemason thing is kind of interesting. If, like, you want to believe for whatever reason a secret society is behind the funding of an airport.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, there are some weird researchable conspiracies about airports. The True Crime Garage series, Boys on the Tracks, that talks about there was like an airport that's in Arkansas that they believed was like, So check those episodes out. Listen to True Crime Garage. They're great. But that particular series talks about like how this airport operated in secrecy and, was able to bring things in undercover and contraband like drugs or whatever. So a similar conspiracy theory about a major international airport, I could see where it would bring some speculation, right? Because airports are just kind of weird. They're like a weird portal of like, we exist and we don't exist while we're in this space in between where like we want to be and where we came from. So airports are just odd. It's like what is it? Like a liminal space in and of itself, right?
Liminal is a great word for it. It's also a place too where it's like it's there permanently, but most people are there temporarily. And so if you're thinking about, I guess it's convenient if for a theory or conspiracy or whatever you want to call it, that something is going on there. Well, what better place to have that than at this space where it's not the same people there all the time. Goods and individuals are coming and going. Because it is that liminal space, it's always in flux. It's never at rest. And so it's a very enticing target or place you might want to like look with more scrutiny. And the interesting thing about conspiracy theories is we know there are actually conspiracies that happen. Like they really do exist, right? So it's always like the balance of kind of where's the evidence, where's the facts, and what just sounds convenient, appealing, or mysterious enough to be like, well, duh, obviously.
I want the evidence.
It sounds like a great episode of television, right? Like I want to binge that series on Netflix. Like I want to know more about it. But that's fiction.
It is, but again, like that's the stories that go behind like why these things are there in the first place are equally interesting in their own way. Even if it's not sexy, and that like even those not as sexy stories deserve to be known, right? And I think it's kind of cool. And, as a storyteller myself, just feeling like finding those little folds that people don't look under, and you find these really interesting things there that people disregard. I mean, that's like humanity. I want the stories to be good. I think that's the other part of it. And they're not. They're often terrible fiction. I'm trying to remember a conspiracy theory that sounds like it could be true, but isn't. Is like the moon landing one. I think is honestly that's the best conspiracy theory. I think if you're going to have one, I think it's really good because the reason why we fake it seems plausible enough, right? Yeah. Like we're just in this race with Russia and we're trying to like win the propaganda war. And so why wouldn't we fake it? That one right there, like that's a good one.
Right.
And this is like it has a compelling narrative and it's moderately plausible.
Right.
The only problem is that once they start explaining why it seems fake, it actually proves why it isn't. Like that's one of those
versus a flat earth conspiracy where that one seems very hard to take serious if you're not from I don't even know what century it was where people thought the earth was flat.
I was like honest like 15th century.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Those are Middle Ages, so, Dark Ages, prior. Right? We're talking Dark Ages, not the Age of Enlightenment, so to speak. That's the one I find most interesting, the modern belief in flat Earth.
Oh, it's interesting, all right.
Versus in the 60s, like you said, the motivation was already there to beat Russia at the space game, right? Like that's the whole deal. Oh, we couldn't quite make it happen, or we thought Russia was on the precipice of getting cosmonauts into space. Oh, well, we'll just manufacture this thing. All right, we made it. We got it. Phew, we won. We, like you said, we won the propaganda war, and thus we won the space race.
Exactly. And there's a narrative fluidity to that. It has it all, baby.
It's got moxie. It's got pizzazz.
But it does take advantage of our paranoia, as all conspiracy theories do. I think at their heart, that's what they're after. They're there to nab that part of your brain that is absorbing fear like a sponge, your amygdala. And so we come to the Denver International Airport, which when this airport was built, the city was on the verge of exploding in terms of population growth. They saw the writing on the wall. They were getting a massive influx of immigrant population as well as people coming from the east. Honestly, in my part of the country where I live, we're more used to seeing people fleeing rather than flowing.
Yeah.
And Chris has seen this on his own where he lives too, that continued westward expansion, as it were. And so Denver builds this airport and puts some very provocative things in it. And we already talked about the horse, and we've already talked about, this vast underground tunnel system, which actually does exist. But they give an explanation for it. I'm kind of willing to go with it. Honestly, they were looking to make this really advanced baggage transfer system. The airport is massive, by the way. It's twice the size of Manhattan. It's a massive airport. But they wanted to then revolutionize the way they handle baggage. And so that the underground tunnel system was supposed to be part of that. And they have a rail system. And so I think the airport was hoping to be able to encompass all of that and its growing population,
right.
Like massive exploding population. So they see their airport, I think, as an opportunity to welcome a lot of newcomers, right? What do you do when you want to welcome some newcomers? Well, you want to spiff the place up a bit, right? So you get some artwork. Only the artwork that was commissioned are a series of murals by an artist named Leo Tanguma. And one of them, in fact, has since been removed. It is a mural, and in the middle of it is this sort of Nazi-esque looking soldier, like
in a gas mask. Yeah.
And he's pointing a gun at a bunch of kids, but it's juxtaposed with some like happy, like utopian imagery.
Like gardening or planting flowers or something very natural. Yeah.
That, and then they have one called In Peace and Harmony with Nature, which is like just a bunch of kids and animals together in this kind of utopian landscape. And it was like intended to address the destruction of the environment. And so then they had another one called Children of the World Dream of Peace. And again, I think that was about violence in society and trying to rid it. But it's full of these like super happy looking weird kids and like some other dystopian imagery. So there are a lot of these images that are tied into these paintings. And there are even like, other symbols that point to Illuminati and other things that make, again, with more New World Order stuff, various symbols, a lot of death imagery associated with it. A couple of these have been removed again, because I think they were creepy and questionable enough, and enough people responded negatively to them that they took them out. So like the Nazi soldier with the gas mask was one of those. I got to see that one before they took it out. The act of them taking it out kind of feeds in, I think, to the conspiracy.
Well, I would argue any response or any action feeds into the conspiracy. Like that's the problem with conspiracies. They tend to be self-feeding. So regardless of a response, you can spin it such that, and I think we'll talk about this more, where the airport tries to embrace some of the conspiracies. To someone who's a true believer, They're just going to be like, oh, they're doing it to throw us off the scent, right? Like they're mocking it to destigmatize it, but we know the truth. If you remove a mural, they'd be like, oh, there's an explanation for why it was removed, because they knew we were onto them. And so they wanted to try to cover it up. Like there's always an explanation regardless of the action. Well, once it's embedded, it's like you can't get rid of it. Anything is an explanation as to, oh, this is more confirmation.
Absolutely. And I mean, I would definitely argue that we're seeing that happen in real time today, and people who've learned to take advantage of that particular thought process. Mm-hmm. What's interesting too is, in addition to these murals by Leo Tanguma, they have another mural. I don't know if that's him or it could be him, but there's like a demon jumping out of a suitcase. That might be part of a Tanguma mural. But there's also a statue of Anubis, the Egyptian god of death. There is also the formation of the runways, when you look at it from overhead, appear to look like a swastika.
I hate to use the term perfect swastika, but I mean, it's definitely like in psychology, there's top-down processing where it's like you see a thing and you recognize it only because you know something else similar to it. So your brain recognizes the pattern. It's not that perfect formation. But yeah, I mean, if you look at it, it definitely is more or less that shape. Squished, if that makes sense. But why is it shaped that way?
They say it's meant so that all of the runways could be used simultaneously, regardless of weather patterns and what have you. So, you could have planes taking off in every direction. Whereas a lot of airports don't use that formation.
But you might want it if you're trying to create this giant hub, bringing the east and the western parts of the country together. What is not a more central U.S. hub of air travel than Denver? I can't think of any. I mean, there are some in Texas, like Dallas and so forth, but it's like, to me, the major middle hub, living on the West Coast and having to fly back east, a lot of flights go through Denver. It's huge. It's a massive hub.
Yeah, it flew into Denver a ton. And it's honestly the perfect trip. It's like 2.5 hours in, 2.5 hours to the West Coast. It's like it divides it perfectly in half.
So if you're going to be this major hub, you might want to make sure that regardless of wind patterns, they have a lot of weather effects that come off the Colorado Rockies.
Ooh.
They are a part of the country that is severely affected by what weather comes across the Rockies. That is irrefutable. And so when you have those kind of weather patterns and you want to keep this major hub operating, you might want to plan it such that we're not going to have delays when the weather coming off the Rockies is a little turbulent.
Exactly. And to reiterate, it isn't a swastika shape, not a true one. They said they thought of it as a pinwheel, which honestly I could see. So
it's seeing what you want to see is really what it is. That's basic psychology, basic perception, top-down processing.
there's a lot of stuff in the Denver airport that is odd. I think we could all agree on that. But it started to get the attention of the mass media back around 2015 or 2016 or so, as more and more people started commenting on the weird art installations that they have. Because those murals and things, those were only a few of the things. There's a lot of odd artwork throughout that whole airport.
Sure.
So if you find yourself on a long layover there, you really should walk around. It's a sight to behold. It really is. So the CEO, Kim Day, she addressed a lot of these issues finally, after the media got a hold of it and it was proliferating throughout the internet. And so they talked about, they acknowledged all the rumors and hearsay surrounding the airport, and they decided to just start embracing the weirdness, as you said, Chris, right? They started doing more art installations, and they did like a costume thing. They got a talking gargoyle that taunts the travelers and says, "Welcome to Illuminati HQ." They fully acknowledge that they're in on the joke, quote unquote. It adds more charm, right, to the whole situation, or more reason to believe. But here's the thing. They point to the size and the cost to make this airport, by the way. $4.8 billion, a few years overdue, and massive. Well, the Hong Kong airport cost $20 billion to build, came in way over budget, and is even bigger than the Denver airport.
Also, point to a large capital project of that magnitude that gets done on budget and on time. Or even, frankly, small, like, think of small municipal projects that happen. How many things come in at or under budget? It is so rare.
I could even probably dig up the history of the Dayton International Airport, the airport where I live, and find an instance where they went grossly over budget and over time on an expansion project or, something of the like. Like, this is not anything new. And this is in terms of major international airports and scale and budget. Denver is not competing with many of the major world hubs out there. So again, I think this is just another sexy-ish conspiracy theory born out of people's misunderstanding of numbers and construction and budgets and, those things that most people aren't familiar with. The people that were responsible for funding and building that project, they have a lot more knowledge on some of this, right?
Well, of course. I mean, it's like you're going to do a project, you estimate the cost of materials. You don't know. I mean, again, they don't build this. It's not 5 months to build this airport, right? You don't know the cost of materials 3 years from now. You can project and anticipate, but materials, labor costs, shortages. I mean, there's any number of things that could happen, or unforeseen roadblocks. This happens all the time. And it's just funny to me that the automatic assumption is, well, it's extra money because they had to build in all of these secret layers and dastardly, dark, sinister things. There's a tunnel to the nearest military base where there's UFOs being hidden. It's the new Area 51. Okay, sure. That seems like a logical explanation for something as simple as a budget overrun that happens on practically every project.
Nobody wants to talk about the actual cost of a gallon of milk. They just want the milk. And that's fine. But when you start making conspiracies based on false assumptions about how milk is produced, then yeah, you really do need to know the cost of milk. I think, and I've been talking about it or hinting about it through the whole episode, so it isn't like I'm revealing anything here. And we could talk about the weird art and the symbolism in that art and what it might mean. But that would just be talking about art. That's an art discussion. That's how they all are. right?
The worst art an artist can make is something no one talks about.
Exactly. Like, we are talking about it because it's interesting, but that's what art is supposed to do.
It's not there for you to love, like, or find aesthetically pleasing all the time. And listen, there's plenty of artwork that I look at and I'm like, that's garbage. But I'm sure that artist thought someone's going to think this about this piece of work, but they're going to have a discussion about it with somebody else and talk about why. Or if we're lucky, it might even become news, let alone part of some conspiracy about what's really going on. But you know who you should probably ask the intention of the artwork? Probably the artist. And guess what? I'm not going to commission a mural and just be like, you decide. Because we know exactly the intention of the artist when they made that artwork. The same goes for Mustang. We know exactly what Jimenez, he had a horse. Was it Appaloosa? I'm going to look this up back to my notes real quick. He had
Blackjack, right? His name was Blackjack.
He had a horse named Blackjack. This horse was an Appaloosa stallion. The color of Blucifer of Mustang, the sculpture, is based off the color of this horse, which he said he bought in fulfillment of a childhood desire of becoming a successful artist, which he did. So there's a very logical reason why he chose that color and that kind of horse likeness, if you will, that kind of Appaloosa stallion. There's a very specific look to it. And, of course, the eyes being an homage to his father. And what frustrates me about this conspiracy theory and others is that it diminishes the work and the life of the artist and the people who survived him. He unfortunately died because of this artwork. He put his literal and figurative life into it. And for you to reduce it to some sexy theory that you can speculate about on the internet is a disservice to his life and his family, who have carried on his legacy and basically decided, as hard as it was, they wanted to complete the sculpture because it's 2 years later that it actually gets installed after his death. And you just want to come around, I'm saying you, like you listener, but people want to come around and just take that all away and suggest there's some, what's the Dan Brown book?
Oh, Da Vinci
Thank you.
Code.
It's very Da Vinci Code, right? Again, work of fiction, everybody. Where I'm going to take this wonderful global conspiracy idea and erase human beings out of it. People making life decisions, making good choices, trying to do their best, their work or whatever. We're going to take this all away because it sounds like there's some evil conspiracy, these overlords creating a bunker for the elites to survive the next apocalypse of the aliens and the lizard people conspiring in the tunnels under. What? And they're landing on swastika runways. What? You put all these pieces together and suddenly you get this Salvador Dali looking final piece, and like the puzzle doesn't put together. It doesn't make any sense. But yet on some level, the simplicity does. Now I'm getting worked up. It frustrates me. It frustrates me.
You are absolutely right, though. And I feel like this is something that we might continue here and there to harp upon, because I feel like we figured out what it is about our shared beliefs and whatnot that kind of like keeps popping out. And like you said, great word, diminishing what's beautiful and unusual and fascinating about what we do know, the reality of things versus the stuff that is often conjured up from the realms and wastes of the things that we can't answer and the things that frustrate us. It hardly ever comes from a positive place.
Well, what's the whole thing? If history only makes you feel good, then you're not studying history, right? Like,
well, that's true.
There's a part of it there where it's like history's not there for us to feel good about ourselves. It's there, hopefully, to teach a lesson about behavior and consequences and movements, and just it's a lesson. And I know we all grew up in history class. I'm never going to use this. And it's like, yes, I'm not going to walk out and say, what did the Stamp Act of 19 blah 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 do for the whatever? Like, no one's quizzing you like that. But much like no one's quizzing you about algebra on the street, but it causes you to think in a different way and hopefully be more analytical and more understanding, and hopefully not jump to conclusions without some basis of, does this really pass a litmus test? Does this sound right, or does it just sound alluring? And I don't know. That to me, I think, is a way in which we can operate in the world where, I don't know.
I'm with you. I tend to feel like there is, if reality presents a bit of a vast gulf in between, our initial perception of something and what we can conclude about that thing, right? And more often, people don't recognize that gulf for what it is, and they want to shortcut their way to it. But really, you should be looking for a series of islands to jump between, like you're puddle jumping it, like you're visiting Fiji or Hawaii or whatever. And it's an archipelago of discovery and logic along the way. Fewer and fewer people want to do that anymore. They want that shortcut. They want that easy explanation, and not only just easy, but interesting, like in the way that a Marvel movie is interesting. I'm not here to yuck that yum for people, but I don't know. It takes like a slight adjustment to be able to look at certain stories that might seem mundane, but find the magic in them. So I find like the story of Luis Jimenez and, the story of the birth of this airport and this gateway into the American West is just pretty fascinating in of itself, because you're talking about like the innovation that people came up with to say, let's make our airport the curiosity, because what's going to happen when people fly into this airport just to see what's weird about it? They're going to come into our city. They're going to spend money here. They're going to do stuff here. Nobody just flies into an airport. Nobody just says, oh, I'm going to fly to Denver just to see the airport. And then I'm just going to hop a plane and go home.
Right.
They're going to fly to Denver. They might hang out at the airport, and hey, what a great way to support the local economy there. Because if you're at the airport, you might stop at the restaurants or the stores and all the things. And then you go into the city and spend money there. It's a brilliant marketing and tourism strategy. That is so unsexy. And I admit that if I were picking the most interesting story to watch in movie form starring Nicolas Cage, I would absolutely pick the one full of conspiracy theories. Yeah. I really would. But it's kind of cool. Mostly because most marketing and advertising is kind of bland and dull, and especially this kind of stuff. But this one's like, it appeals to the imagination. It's bold and it's funny and it's creative and it's weird. And absolutely worth just viewing. Like, I want everybody to see Blucifer because it's incredible. It's terrifying. It's a massive, disturbing horse, and I will never forget the first time I saw it. I'll never forget that moment, because it is a striking piece of art before you know anything else about it.
Well, it's that New World, was it Art Commission or whatever? Or Airport Commission?
Yeah, the New World. Oh, yeah, it doesn't even exist. Oh, that was the other thing that they clarified, that New World Commission. They made it up because there were a bunch of people that came together to fund the building of that airport, and they just made up a name for it. And they were like, what do we call this? And then they just made it up. Or that's what they say.
That's what they want you to think.
I know there are people listening to this probably that think that we are easily led astray. And hey, maybe, I don't know, whatever. No. I'm not going to ever talk about anything on this show that I feel the conspiracy theorists might get a jump on me. Because I just feel like there aren't many. Maybe we could talk about the Jeffrey Epstein thing at some point. I mean, that's an interesting one too. We'll talk about the moon landing and Jeffrey Epstein. Okay.
Well, those are ones where there is an allure of perhaps a credible conspiracy, right? Like those have an interesting allure of
or JFK. Okay, there's another one. You want to talk about the assassination of a president in the 20th century? You don't even have to talk about the Kennedys to know that that's going to be a draw for many theories. And then you add in that they kind of created the basis for the theories based on how...
Oh my God. I mean, the entire Kennedy family, you have like Chappaquiddick and all that. Like there's so many things out there with, interesting conspiracies about what happened and what is said to have happened. And it's just interesting. You end up... And I know these are works of fiction, but I feel like there is an object lesson or something in it. But it's like, I think of a show like Succession, and I just feel like you have these complicated people doing things, and you sort of see the complexity of people making decisions and how from the outside you could simplify motives or motivation to do a thing. And when you peek behind the curtain, you see it's a lot more messy, and it's not just, I am a maniacal person who's going to rule with an iron fist and do a thing. You just see like, yeah, they're not good people, but they're also just imperfect, flawed people trying to do this thing and use the situation to their advantage. And I don't know, like or even like Breaking Bad's another good example of it, where it's just like, there's a lot more complexity, and sometimes this simple explanation doesn't do it justice. And it's also why we have prejudice and stereotypes, because we look at someone who's an other and we just want to simplify them to this one narrative. And that is a whole person. It makes it ugly and complicated and maybe not as like alluring or mysterious, but it's not that it's still not amazing, that life and the universe and the world aren't amazing, but we don't need false magic.
That's the thing. I think in order to break through, I guess the what I consider the nexus emotion that is at the center of the creation of so much conspiracy theory, so much propaganda, so much misery, honestly, is our fear. And fear, when used a certain way, it's obviously at its most effective as a fictional device whenever you have a firm grasp on reality, in the sense of like, okay, I know I'm in a fictional space here, whereas some people might not have that quite for whatever reason, right? So yeah, I feel like being able to just, get into these topics and do deep dives on them and find the origins and expose the roots and whatnot is a way to kind of like kill that fear, because then once you get rid of the fear of what's different and what's scary and confront that, and you find it's sort of like when you're playing a video game and you find the vulnerable spot that you hit on the boss, right? That take the hit points down. That's kind of what I like to do, because then, yeah, once you clear that fear out of the way, then it leaves room to sort of like admire the construction of it, the look of it, the magic of it in other ways. So I want people to be able to go to Denver and look at that airport and how weird it is, and appreciate it for the culmination of human innovation and spirit and art and everything that went into that to create this sort of beacon and gateway to the American West, and get weirded out by it. But rest assured that the tunnels below the airport are for trains and suitcases. Maybe in a Walking Dead scenario, one day you can make your way down to those, catacombs beneath the defunct and dead skeleton of the Denver International Airport and make it into your own, bunker for the apocalypse.
Think not of Blucifer as like this evil demonic presence, but more of a guardian of travelers passing through the Denver National Airport, right?
Exactly. Like, would you not want Blucifer on your side?
I mean,
please.
Come on. If I had to be for or against Blucifer, like on Team Blucifer or off, yeah, I want that stallion on my side, baby. He's a 32-foot, 9,000-pound beast. Yes, please.
Oh my God.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Can I get on it? That's. Can I ride that stallion?
So good. So good.
That's the After Dark.
Ding Dong Darkness Time After Dark. Is that what that is?
Yes, that's what that is.
DDDTAD.
Yes, we're going to do it one day.
That's
we'll
great.
See. We just have to have enough subscribers and likes and reviews and all that fun stuff. Right. So, all right, Chris, we survived another trip into the darkness time.
We've survived 2 devils already. The Devil's Interval and Blucifer. We're 2-0, man. We're doing good. We're doing good.
Whatever happens next week, I think if we can survive this, then we've got this down. So we'll be back with another alluringly dark Ding Dong Darkness Time topic. Reach out to us at dddarknesstime@gmail.com or the same handle on Twitter, Instagram, and or just send a wish up into the sky. Maybe a little, hit me.
Or put a secret message and some mural artwork and let us know where it is so we can decode it. That's another good way. It's another good way.
Renegade art. That's what we're inspiring here. It is. Move over, Banksy. Yeah. We got this.
Banksy, who? Old news.
Forget that, dude. All right, guys. We'll see you later and have a good one.
Stay dark out there, folks.
Ding Dong Darkness Time has been brought to you and produced by yours truly, Allison Dickson. It was made possible by an array of amazing co-hosts, friends, family, but especially you, the listeners. Big shouts also go out to the brilliant Nathaniel Dickson for the show art and future legend Spencer Morelock for all the music. I'll be back again soon with another episode. In the meantime, be good, you little ding-dongs.